NIO stock, ticker symbol NIO, has been absolutely crushing it lately. In fact, their stock just this past week was up over 25% in the last 5 trading days at the time of this recording, and they were actually up over $10 a share before pulling back a little, now down to the $9 range. Still, this is a stock that was trading as low as $6 a share at the start of the year, but are now up over 50% year to date in 2019. Keep in mind that I've bought all of my shares in the $6 range, and admittedly, I did trim about 5% off of my position at around $10.40, just because I was now up over 55% on my position, but I do plan on using those profits to buy back even more shares of NIO if it pulls back a little further. But if it keeps climbing, then I may just hold the remaining 95% for the long term, but we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. In any case, a lot of people have been asking me why the stock is soaring, and to give an update on my position and how I feel about the stock going forward now that we're heading into their next earnings. I think it's in about a week or so. So we're going to talk about all of that and more in today's video. Let's get started. What's up, everybody? My name is Ala and welcome to my world of stocks. Now, in case you don't know anything about NIO, I'll just give you a tiny quick little intro. They're just an electric vehicle maker out in China. So a lot of people sometimes call them like the Tesla of China, but they really just have some similar aspirations to something like Tesla. So there are some similarities depending on what you're looking at. But you can see why investors would naturally gravitate to a stock like this, because it trades with a market cap of less than $10 billion versus something like Tesla that has a market cap that is more than 5 times larger at around $54 billion. But there's obviously a reason for that. Tesla is a much larger company with a much more popular brand that sold around 90,000 vehicles just in their last quarter, while NIO only did close to 7,000. Although to be fair to NIO, they only recently started selling their first vehicles midway through 2018, while Tesla started selling theirs back in 2012, and in Tesla's first 6 months, they sold around 2,600 vehicles, while NIO sold much more at over 11,000 in their first 6 months. Still, Tesla did like over 30 times more revenue than NIO in the third quarter of last year, and Tesla is currently profitable, whereas NIO is still losing money. In any case, I think it's a little ridiculous to compare the two companies right now because they're in different stages of their life cycle and there's just too many variables to consider. But I think it's even more ridiculous to suggest that both companies can't coexist in a vehicle market that is becoming much more electric and autonomous over time, which is what they both specialize in. Not to mention that both have huge ambitions in the largest EV market in the world, that being China. See, Tesla is opening a new gigafactory out in Shanghai, and NIO is already native to the country with the eventual goal of expanding globally outside of just China. But speaking a little further to the opportunity that both companies have in China, the country has shown a larger increase in both supply and demand of electric vehicles than any other country in the world from 2014 to 2016, and moving further along in the timeline, here's China EV sales from 2017 showing once again their complete dominance over any other country. And even looking out into the distant future, Bloomberg predicts that China will continue to see more growth all the way to 2030, even beating out all of Europe combined. That would be pretty damn impressive. But this is all stuff that we've already been talking about on the channel, so what's the recent news that sent the stock flying over the past week? Well, besides the markets doing pretty well overall, NIO was highlighted on the popular TV show called 60 Minutes, where they interviewed NIO CEO William Li, who is a 44-year-old billionaire entrepreneur. But before diving into NIO, they first spoke about China's dominance in the EV market, where they plan to build 1 million electric vehicles this year alone, which they claim will be around half of the total EVs produced in the world. They also spoke of how the Chinese government is really fueling their electric vehicle industry by providing huge subsidies that sometimes surpass over $10,000 depending on the city, and in Shanghai they claimed it can cost up to $13,000 in fees just to purchase a license plate, but the government waives that fee if you purchase an electric vehicle. Unfortunately, 60 Minutes didn't provide any further clarification on that, so I researched it a little further myself, and I found this article from The Economist that I find very interesting, and it says that the city of Beijing has an annual quota for issuing new license plates because of all the congestion and pollution, so they do a bi-monthly draw to issue new plates, but the odds of winning that draw have dropped from 6% in 2011 to an all-time low of just 0.2% in 2018. That's pretty crazy. However, in Shanghai, which is what 60 Minutes was talking about, in Shanghai, they also have a strict quota because of similar reasons, but the government there instead holds an online auction where people can bid for license plates, and apparently the last bid that they reported in this article was more than $14,000, which cost more than many of the vehicles even sold in China. And the auctions make up around 2% of the city's total revenue. That's pretty insane, and I found this article very, very interesting. But anyway, back to the 60 Minutes piece. They also talked about China having around 100 different EV makers, but also said that most of those will die off over time, and that NIO stands out because it's the only domestic, fully electric luxury car brand that currently has their vehicles out on the market. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but I do know that NIO is at least one of the few fully electric luxury car brands out there in China. I've also read some reports of there being close to 500 different EV makers in China, so 60 Minutes said about 100. I've read some reports of there being 500, which is like a lot more, but the overwhelming majority of them do sell their vehicles for less than $10,000, and they have no autonomous functionality, and they have dramatically weaker performance across speed and distance versus anything that NIO or Tesla offers. Speaking of which, the 60 Minutes piece went on to talk about price and performance, noting that NIO's ES8 sells for around half the price of Tesla's Model X, yet the NIO has comparable performance as it can go from 0 to 60 in just 4.4 seconds and reaches distances of around 220 miles on a single battery charge. That's more than double what the 5 best-selling EVs in China can do. Not to mention that some reports, like this one from Investors Business Daily, pegs the ES8 as costing almost 3 times less than a Tesla Model X when you take into consideration all of the taxes and subsidies that can be applied. In any case, it's still important to consider that NIO already launched a smaller 5-seater SUV called the ES6 for just a little over $50,000, or around $15,000 less than their bigger ES8, and we're already seeing rumors about NIO announcing an even cheaper sedan later this year that is rumored to be called the EP7, not to be confused with their EP9 supercar that is one of the fastest electric cars in the world, doing 0 to 60 in just 2.7 seconds. That's pretty damn fast. In any case, the show went on to talk about why there's plenty of room for both NIO and Tesla in the world, but that the biggest challenge facing NIO is proving that China can build high-quality vehicles. However, they went on to explain that NIO is already disproving many of these negative assumptions, as they have a partnership with reputable Jack Motors, who helps them build their vehicles, and they use robotic technology that has seen pretty good results so far. They also expanded a bit on how customers can use their phone app to schedule repairs or to swap a dead battery out with a charged one in just 3 minutes thanks to their robot technology, and can even order a NIO van to come charge their vehicle, all of this of course adding to NIO services revenues. On top of that, they talked about NIO's artificial intelligence assistant called Nomi, which by the way can do a number of different things, from adjusting temperature to adjusting the windows, the sunroof, to actually taking selfies. It was kind of funny, they actually took a selfie during the interview when they were interviewing the CEO, but it can also play music, and I've heard that it can even do some online shopping as well, or at least they're integrating that. So it's pretty crazy. It can do a lot, and NIO isn't stopping there, as they're already employing around 600 people in the west coast of the United States, where some of the world's best program and software developers live, to help improve their technologies and services. And this is all in an effort to turn NIO into what the CEO calls not just a vehicle company, but also a lifestyle company that shows off the high status of upper middle to rich class people of China. This is also evident in some of their showrooms, where they essentially built clubhouses on the second floor that are exclusive to NIO owners for socializing, and they even offer all kinds of different classes for adults and even playrooms for children in an effort to support that socialization concept of the upper middle class lifestyle for NIO owners. I personally don't know how I feel about those social clubhouses, as I don't think I would ever waste time going to them, but I still do find this interesting nonetheless. In any case, the next upcoming event to keep a close eye on is NIO's upcoming earnings for their last quarter, which I think is going to be on March 5th, so about a week from now. If you guys want me to do a full review on that earnings, make sure you let me know. You can tell me either in the comment section or just by hitting the like button. If there's enough traction here, then I'll definitely do a review of that earnings. But depending on how that earnings goes, I think, one of two things will happen. I think the stock could definitely take off if they go into that earnings and report some pretty good numbers. And we already know how many vehicle deliveries they had for the quarter. They were targeting over 10,000 deliveries for 2018. We know that they came out with over 11,000, so they definitely already beat that target. We just want to see how does that translate to their financial numbers. How does that translate to revenue, net income? How is their balance sheet looking like? Those are the things that we're going to have to keep an eye on heading into these next earnings here. But if those financials are looking good, then you're going to have hype and you're going to have strong numbers. I think the stock could definitely take off. At which point, I wouldn't necessarily be against trimming my position a little bit more, just because the stock is so volatile, and then maybe using those profits to buy back when it kind of pulls back a little bit. But the other thing that could happen is the numbers could not be that great in the upcoming earnings. And so then you will have hype that pretty much pumped up the stock. And then if you don't have very impressive numbers, that stock is probably going to get hammered. So at which point that would probably be my next buying opportunity. So either way, I'm not too scared about the next upcoming earnings. I've been receiving comments from people saying that they're worried about this next upcoming earnings. I'm not really worried, because if the stock takes off, that's an opportunity to maybe cash in a little bit of some more profits, maybe trim my position a little bit, and then maybe use that when the stock pulls back, because it is a pretty volatile stock. Whereas on the other hand, if the opposite happens, then it's just a buying opportunity, because right now the stock has kind of gotten ahead of me. So I would definitely like the stock to pull back. So I don't necessarily want to see very impressive numbers. I kind of want the stock to pull back a little bit, give me another buying opportunity. Having said that, NIO is still by all accounts my long-term spec stock. So I try not to mess around with it too much. In terms of like trimming my profits or trimming my position and cashing in some profits, I mentioned I cash in about 5% of my position at around $10.40, just because it climbed by so much in such a short amount of time and it's so volatile. Plus the valuation is kind of up there. You got to remember, this is a company that is still not profitable, so the valuation is still, it's kind of up there. But I'm still holding the stock for the long term. So I would say about 90% of my position I do not want to touch. So even if it takes off right now, I'd probably still only cash in about another 5%. I really don't want to touch about 90% of this stock, because I have the high hopes that it could eventually turn into a huge company way down the line, when China becomes an even bigger player in the EV market and has even more dominance. I think NIO could potentially have a slice of that pie, which is where I would hopefully be rewarded as a shareholder. Having said that, a lot of people say, well, you're going to be holding, aren't you scared of it crashing or the company going bankrupt and all these different things? No, I'm not really afraid of that, because this is, again, my spec stock. I know the risk I'm taking. If I were to lose all of my money in NIO, I honestly could not care less. It's my spec stock. I know the risk I'm taking. I'm hoping that it has a very bright future, so I try not to mess with it too much. Only trimmed about 5% so far, and if it continues pulling back, it's already pulling back. If it continues to pull back, I'll pick up those shares right back up, and I'm actually going to pick up even more shares. But I've done all my buying at the $6 range, so I don't necessarily want to mess with that too much. I'd like to get it as low as possible. But again, we have to see what happens in this upcoming earnings. So I'd be willing to trim another 5% if I have to, if it climbs up another huge amount, maybe another 5%, but about 90% of my position, I don't really plan on touching. I just want to hold it for the long term. Having said that, there are some concerns in 2019. So don't be delusional into thinking that this could just be an up year for NIO. It could definitely be a really great year for NIO, but it could also be a little bit of a struggling year too, because there are some concerns. For example, consumer confidence in China is kind of going down because of the slowing down economy and the trade fight with the US. Another concern would be the slowdown of auto sales in China, as also a result of what we just talked about. And then the other concern too is that I think China has lowered their tariffs on auto imports, I think down to like 15%. I think it was like at 40%. I think it's down to like 15%. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that, I have to assume that would dramatically lower the price of some Teslas out there too. So that could maybe also be a concern, maybe a little bit higher competition as well. But either way, we have to just wait until we get this earnings report out. And again, like I said, if you guys want me to review it, I'll review it and we'll go from there. And I'll talk more about their valuation at that point, and I'll also look at their balance sheet. I'll look at their up-to-date balance sheet, and I'll let you guys know what all of my thoughts are on that. So again, if you want to see that, make sure you hit the like button. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. Are you invested in NIO? Are you thinking about investing in it? Again, at these prices, I'm a little hesitant. I'd like to see this next upcoming earnings and get a better picture of how things are going right now, and then I'll readjust and reevaluate my situation there. But I still have a pretty big position in NIO, so I'm not too worried. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.